February 9th, 1965. The Audubon Ballroom, Washington Heights, Manhattan. A white man in a worn leather jacket walks through the front entrance carrying a hunting knife with an 8-inch blade. Security doesn't stop him. The police stationed outside don't question him. And when he reaches the third row, directly in Malcolm X's line of sight, he sits down and waits. What happened in the alley behind that ballroom 90 minutes later was so explosive that the FBI classified it for 3 decades. And the man who made it happen wasn't a cop, wasn't a federal agent, and wasn't part of Malcolm's security team. He was Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. And what he did that night would be buried so deep that even Malcolm X's own family wouldn't learn the truth until 1995. The winter of 1965 was the most dangerous period of Malcolm X's life. He'd broken from the Nation of Islam. Elijah Muhammad had declared him a traitor. Death threats were coming daily. His house in Queens had been firebombed just 7 days earlier while his wife and 4 daughters slept inside. The NYPD knew Malcolm was a target. The FBI knew Malcolm was a target, but neither organization was rushing to protect him. J. Edgar Hoover's FBI had Malcolm under constant surveillance, not to keep him safe, but to monitor his every move. They wanted him neutralized, discredited, destroyed. And if someone else did the job for them, even better. Malcolm knew this. He told his wife Betty, "They want me dead, but they want someone else to pull the trigger." He was right. On the morning of February 9th, 6 days before his assassination, Malcolm X was scheduled to speak at the Audubon Ballroom at 3 p.m. The speech was open to the public. No metal detectors, no bag checks, minimal security. Malcolm's own team consisted of just 3 men, all volunteers, none with formal training. Meanwhile, 200 people were expected to attend. Anyone could walk in. Anyone could be armed. And someone was. His name was Robert Shelton, Jr., a Grand Cyclops of the Mississippi Knights of the Ku Klux Klan. He traveled to New York with one mission: kill Malcolm X and make it look like a botched robbery. The plan was simple, brutal, effective. Wait until Malcolm finished speaking, follow him to his car, attack in the confusion. Shelton had done this before, back in Alabama in 1961 when freedom rallies came through Birmingham. He knew how to make it look random. He knew how to disappear. But what Shelton didn't know was that someone had been watching Malcolm's back for weeks. Someone who didn't trust the FBI. Someone who didn't trust the NYPD. Someone who understood that in Harlem, real protection didn't come from badges. It came from the streets. Bumpy Johnson was 58 years old in 1965. He'd been out of prison for 2 years after serving a decade at Alcatraz. Most people thought he was retired, that his days of running Harlem were over. They were wrong. Bumpy still controlled the numbers racket. He still had every cop, politician, and street captain in Upper Manhattan on his payroll. And when Malcolm X returned to Harlem after leaving the Nation of Islam, Bumpy made a decision. Malcolm was under his protection, whether Malcolm knew it or not. They'd met once before, back in 1963, at a barbershop on 116th Street. Malcolm had been getting a shave when Bumpy walked in. The room went silent. Everyone knew who both men were. Malcolm, the fiery revolutionary preaching black power. Bumpy, the quiet kingpin who'd survived 40 years in the underworld. They didn't speak that day. They didn't need to. They just nodded, a mutual acknowledgement of respect. But after the firebombing in Queens, Bumpy sent word to Malcolm's people. "Tell him I'm watching." Malcolm never responded, but he understood the message. Bumpy had his own intelligence network. Runners, drivers, waiters, janitors, people nobody noticed but who saw everything. And 3 days before the February 9th speech, one of Bumpy's informants spotted Robert Shelton at a motel in the Bronx. The informant was a 19-year-old kid named Jerome who worked the front desk at the Ambassador Motor Lodge. A white man had checked in alone, paid cash, gave a fake name. That wasn't unusual. But what caught Jerome's attention was the duffel bag. It was military grade, olive green, and when the man set it down, Jerome heard metal clanking inside. Jerome called his cousin called his boss called Bumpy. By that evening, Bumpy knew exactly who Robert Shelton was. A quick phone call to an NYPD detective on his payroll confirmed it. Shelton had been flagged by the FBI 6 months earlier for making threats against civil rights leaders. But instead of arresting him, they put him on a watch list and let him move freely. Bumpy understood immediately. The feds weren't trying to stop Shelton. They were waiting to see what he'd do. On the morning of February 9th, Bumpy stationed 4 men around the Audubon Ballroom. Not inside, outside. One across
the street in a parked Cadillac. One in the diner 2 doors down. One in the alley behind the building. And one on the rooftop of the adjacent apartment complex. They weren't there to stop Shelton from entering. They were there to see what happened after. At 2:45 p.m., Shelton walked through the front doors of the Audubon Ballroom. He wore a brown leather jacket, blue jeans, and work boots. He looked like a construction worker, unremarkable, invisible. Security waved him through without a second glance. He took a seat in the 3rd row, left side, 15 feet from the stage. Bumpy's man in the diner saw him enter. He immediately walked to a payphone and dialed Bumpy's number. He's inside. Bumpy was sitting in his office on Lenox Avenue. He didn't panic. He didn't rush. He just asked one question. Is he carrying? Couldn't tell from here, but he's got something under his jacket. Bumpy hung up and made a decision. He wasn't going to stop the speech. He wasn't going to alert security. He wasn't going to call the cops. Because if he did any of those things, Shelton would just disappear and come back another day. No, Bumpy was going to let Shelton make his move, and then Bumpy was going to make his. Malcolm's speech started at 3:10 p.m. He spoke for 47 minutes about unity, about self-defense, about the need for black people to control their own communities. Shelton sat perfectly still the entire time, hands folded in his lap, eyes locked on Malcolm. When the speech ended, the crowd stood and applauded. Malcolm shook hands with several attendees, signed a few autographs, then headed toward the back exit. Shelton followed. The alley behind the Audubon Ballroom was narrow, dimly lit, lined with trash cans and fire escapes. Malcolm walked toward his car, a dark blue Oldsmobile parked 30 feet away. His driver was already behind the wheel. 2 of Malcolm's security guards walked beside him. Shelton was 20 feet behind, moving quickly now, his right hand inside his jacket. Bumpy's man in the alley saw it happen in real time. Shelton reaching for the knife, Malcolm's security team distracted, looking the wrong direction. And then Bumpy stepped out from behind a dumpster. He didn't say a word. He didn't announce himself. He just moved, fast, silent, precise. Shelton never saw him coming. Bumpy's left hand grabbed Shelton's wrist before the knife cleared his jacket. His right hand drove a short, brutal punch into Shelton's kidney. Shelton gasped, his legs buckling. Bumpy twisted his arm behind his back and dragged him into the shadows. Malcolm never turned around. His security never noticed. The driver pulled away, and the alley was empty, except for Bumpy, Shelton, and the man who'd been waiting on the fire escape with a suppressed pistol. What happened next was quick and clinical. Bumpy pressed Shelton against the brick wall. "Who sent you?" Shelton tried to spit at him. Bumpy hit him again, this time in the ribs. "Who sent you?" Shelton's voice was shaking. "You people don't know when to shut up. Someone's got to do it." Bumpy leaned in close. "You just signed your death warrant." He looked up at the fire escape, nodded once. The suppressed shot sounded like a champagne cork popping. Shelton dropped instantly, a single hole in the back of his head. Bumpy checked his pulse. Nothing. He went through Shelton's pockets, pulled out a wallet, a motel key, and a folded piece of paper with Malcolm's schedule written in pencil. Then he made a call. Within 20 minutes, 2 of Bumpy's cleanup crew arrived in an unmarked van. They wrapped Shelton's body in a tarp, loaded it into the back, and drove to a warehouse in Red Hook, Brooklyn. By midnight, Robert Shelton Jr. no longer existed. No body, no missing person report, no investigation. The FBI didn't ask questions. The NYPD didn't investigate. The Mississippi Knights of the Ku Klux Klan quietly assumed Shelton had gotten cold feet and abandoned the mission. But the FBI knew. They had an informant in Bumpy's crew who'd reported the incident within 48 hours. J. Edgar Hoover himself reviewed the report and made a decision. Classify it. Not because it was illegal, not because it was morally wrong, but because it complicated the narrative. The FBI had spent years trying to paint Malcolm X as a dangerous radical who inspired violence. If the public learned that the KKK had tried to assassinate him and that a black gangster had killed the assassin to protect him, it would make Malcolm a victim, a martyr, a hero. Hoover couldn't allow that. So the report was sealed, marked top secret, filed in a classified archive, set to remain hidden for 30 years. Bumpy never told Malcolm what happened. He never asked for credit. He never mentioned it to anyone outside his inner circle. But Malcolm knew. 6 days later, on February 21, 1965, Malcolm X was assassinated at the Audubon Ballroom by 3 gunmen affiliated with the Nation of Islam. Bumpy wasn't there that day. He'd warned
Malcolm's team that another attempt was coming. He'd offered to station armed men inside the ballroom, but Malcolm had refused. He didn't want violence in his name. When Bumpy heard the news, he didn't cry, he didn't rage. He just sat in his office, staring at the photograph of Malcolm he'd clipped from the Amsterdam News, and said one sentence: "They got what they wanted." The classified FBI report was finally declassified in 1995, 30 years after Malcolm's death. It was discovered by a historian researching Hoover's surveillance of black leaders. The report confirmed that Robert Shelton Jr., a known KKK operative, had been killed in New York City on February 9, 1965, and that the killing was carried out by associates of Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. The media barely covered it. Malcolm's family never received an official explanation, and the government never acknowledged that they'd allowed a KKK assassin to roam free while monitoring Malcolm's every move. Bumpy Johnson died in 1968, 3 years after Malcolm. He never spoke publicly about the alley, but people close to him said he kept that piece of paper, the one with Malcolm's schedule, locked in a safe for the rest of his life. not as a trophy, as a reminder. The system doesn't protect revolutionaries. The streets do. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't what people see. It's what you make sure they never find out. If this story of loyalty, justice, and the silent protector who saved Malcolm X moved you, hit that subscribe button and smash that like. Share this with someone who needs to understand the real history they don't teach in schools. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have done what Bumpy did that night? Keep fighting for truth, and I'll see you in the next one.